Hello, beautiful community. We're going to do a request today, which is to talk about confidence from a somewhat philosophical point of view. But confidence is a big thing. You know that in your personal life. You also know it's a big thing in politics, and maybe breaking down how it works is fascinating. Maybe it isn't, so I don't really know if I should welcome you to this cup of coffee with me to chat about confidence. But if it's interesting, please do stay. Um, so many communications and requests I'm still behind on Patreon. If you have asked something, the chances I'll get back to you are 100%. It's just incredibly slow. So I'm grateful to you all for being with me. Now, this is not allowed. This is a caffeinated cup of coffee, and for the last 8 months, I'm not allowed. So your trick is not to get bored during this chat, and also make sure I don't have more than 3 sips of this. There's a lot of significant losses that chronic illness gives you, and then some very trivial, little tiny losses here and there. Confidence. Okay, we need the first sip. Sorry for the slurping. This is a natural. It's very good. So let's begin. Here we're gonna let's put social confidence here, and here let's put owned confidence. So these are the two main categories of confidence as I think of it. Owned confidence is real confidence, but this is also very powerful, very magical, very transformational social confidence. And while charisma often relies on owned confidence, it's mostly compatible with just very high social confidence. You can be devilishly charismatic and actually have very low owned confidence. So social confidence, owned confidence. Why don't we start a little bit with social confidence? So I think social confidence is essentially comfort, including physical comfort in space. And I don't think you can talk about social confidence without making a little bit of a distinction between things that are more in common with a masculine psychology and things that are more in common with a feminine psychology. There is a tendency, blue-haired tendency in our culture, and a lot of blue-haired things are cool, and some blue-haired things are naive and indulgent. But there's a tendency in our culture to want to say that something like a male or a female psychology is a social construct. And I think that if you think that, I won't argue the case now, then actually you will not be able to even explain why people go and buy a loaf of bread. In other words, once you begin to talk about very basic elements of human motivation, you're going to have to talk about universal features of human psychology, how they get elaborated under different cultural circumstances, and then you'll have to say that there are some differences between men and women psychologically that are biologically derived. Now, the most funny example of social confidence that I have come across, I think because some people I really love are in the journalism world, is that Barbie-like toys, male Barbie-like toys, so I suppose that maybe Ken-like, journalists who work for, let's say, CNN, who sort of come in on a live from a country. And very often, of course, I'm generalizing, a lot of them are not like that, but a lot of them are. It's like mass-produced toys for perfect social confidence. It's like you get a boy who is tall, but not extremely tall, so something like 6'2", 6'3", perfect teeth, very nicely proportioned face, and evidently wherever you knock, whatever situation you put him into, he'll be able to just come up with a question, come up with a comment and fit in. You put him in front of a world leader he's never met before, he'll come up with 2 or 3 questions. He'll be able to respond to whatever the world leader says. It's possible to spend 2 or 3 hours with somebody like that and feel, have they actually said anything deep or interesting in these 3 hours? And the answer could be no. But nevertheless, they have a completely sort of unbreakable capacity to effortlessly cope with any social dynamic, and they sort of go in and out without any problems, and they are unflappable. I think that's much more of an American than a European thing. But you see these, and when you come across these 6'2" toys, you kind of say, like, very interesting, like, where were you made? Can I buy one myself? I mean, why are you so impregnable with your social confidence and you're like almost machine-like? It's attractive. It's not deeply attractive, but it's attractive. So that's an example of social confidence. That's, of course, compatible with that 6'2" pretty thing, being just existentially terrified deep down, or not having processed lots of things, in deep need of therapy in a way they aren't aware of. All of that is possible. So it doesn't mean they have owned confidence, but they have a great degree of social confidence. So, but what about women? Aren't there also women like that? And I think the answer is absolutely yes. In the field of journalism, you're also going to find women who are very, very comfortable everywhere. But I think that if you're talking about social confidence, there's going to be a difference between men and women tendentiously. So the way a man is present in space is often about feeling that you are kind of dispersed across the whole space. You kind of own, not in a dominating way, in a way that's compatible with others also owning, but you own that space completely. You're kind of spread out everywhere in there. And you kind of, if you're really socially comfortable, you've got very high social confidence, you kind of feel, cool, I'm sitting here talking to you, but also I know there's like a couple talking there, and funny, let's look at them, there they are, and if we went over, talk to them, we'd be completely comfortable, super cool, no problems, we're just comfortable everywhere, kind of spread ourselves out across the room. It's a kind of a projection of physical ownership across the whole space. Not in a domineering or authoritarian way, unless you're screwed up and sort of unlovely, but you're just projecting yourself like that. And that's actually not going to disempower people in itself. The impregnability of confidence often disempowers people. Like with these 6'2" toys, others around them lose confidence because they feel, well, I would be less confident in certain social environments, but I'm speaking to some kind of factory-made toy that would never be unconfident. So that's a bit weird, so it could be awkward. But you own the space. But if it's a distinctly feminine, very high level of social confidence, you don't own the whole space. You have like an aura of presence in a kind of a 2 square meter zone, and you can shift that 2 square meter zone anywhere in the room, and you'll be equally as comfortable there, but you're not all at the same time spreading yourself out across the space and say you own it. You almost kind of float in the space with self-possession, if we're talking high level feminine social confidence, or you sort of spread yourself out across the space with unobtrusive ownership if it's high level of masculine social confidence. Now, where does charisma, the word charisma, come in? I think that charisma is possible with exclusively no, I'm lying. Charisma is possible with a lot of social confidence plus some owned confidence. We'll talk more about owned confidence. But it is possible to be charismatic with a lot of social confidence and only a bit of owned confidence. Like it's possible to have fundamental gaps in your owned confidence and still be incredibly charismatic. I mean, let's take an extreme example. Not a political observation, obviously, but Bill Clinton, in his younger days, walks into a room and is even more comfortable walking into any room than Barack Obama, who is supremely socially confident and is comfortable walking into any room ever and will never develop a chink of insecurity no matter what he comes across. Like if Putin were to set up some kind of really awkward social dynamic for Obama, he would not be flustered no matter what that social dynamic was. Clinton wouldn't be flustered either. But Clinton maybe is even more vivaciously socially confident. So how do we use that example to compare social confidence versus own confidence? Well, Clinton's completely comfortable with everybody in the room. Moreover, as soon as he walks in, he would make eye contact with individuals and begin developing one-on-one relationships with them and begin to go deeper one-on-one with them the way Obama wouldn't. Obama is not interested in that. And that's quite frankly because Bill Clinton is a bit socially needy. He needs not to impose himself on others, but to receive a kind of energy from others by developing a dynamic of intimacy with him. So for Clinton, it's actually extreme social charisma in the mode of one-on-one engagement as self-rescue. When Bill Clinton walks into a room and goes like this one-on-one for 40 seconds with a stranger who has no power, but Bill is really engaged, what he's doing there is self-rescue. He needs that. It's a big story about, childhood trauma and so on. So there is a almost supernaturally charismatic person who has not just a big gap in their own confidence, but actually has such a high social confidence because of the gap in their own confidence. So, now, let's say one more thing, but now more fundamental thing about men and women. So in our culture, there is still quite a lot of prejudice swimming around against women as testimonial subjects of significant sort of equal credibility to men. And that means that as a man, for me, now, of course, I have to also say as a heterosexual white man, but as a man, for me, the achievement of gaining a certain level of owned or social confidence is less great than it is for a woman. It's harder for a woman to completely block out all possible chinks in owned confidence in particular, when the culture consistently doesn't give you the credibility you deserve. So even when you take somebody supremely confident, well, let's stay with the Clintons. Please don't think this is a political endorsement of their politics. Hillary Clinton. So Hillary it has, this is why partly she lost in 2016, and Biden would have won in 2016 probably, before his cognitive decline. Not that would have been the right politics for America, but at the level of victory, that's where we would have been at, but defeat and victory. But Hillary has what I would call a somewhat corroded layer of hardness around her. So she's bloody tough in any situation, but it's not the most organic, natural toughness. It's a toughness that's part of a self-protective shield put in place by trauma. So it's possible for Hillary to be in a room and for some powerful man, let's say some man as powerful as her, to say something that gaslights her, wrongly gaslights her, obviously, and for her, for 2.5 to 7.5 seconds, to develop a bit of a chink. Hillary says, well, I saw the blue sky, and the guy says, there wasn't a blue sky. And it's possible for Hillary for sort of 2.5 to 7.5 seconds to say, well, did I really see the blue sky? To question herself. But then that layer of learned and sort of cultivated hardness will come over and extinguish that chink. And then Hillary will say, the sky was blue, this is untrue, and this guy is an idiot. but that's not achieved in the most natural way. So what I'm saying is that eliminating all of these chinks fully, at the level of own confidence, that nothing anybody can say to you, no matter how powerful, will ever throw you, is a bigger achievement for a woman, because we still take men more epistemically seriously on balance, even in the more progressive cultures in the West. So why don't we gossip around a tiny bit? And why don't I? This is going to be a very embarrassing part of the video, although I'm not embarrassable, so it's going to be could be embarrassing for you. Let me try to say something about my own confidence, which was part of the question I got, and a little bit about confident or unconfident people I've met. I am seeing a big lack of confidence, funnily enough, in technocratic centrist politicians, and I'm frustrated by that, because we need our politicians to be really confident now. And if you're really confident, you're more able to play offense rather than defense in your politics. Because if you play defense trying to keep your institutions afloat, you're actually going to corrode them more. We have Rachel Reeves, who is our chancellor at the moment, a woman sort of more or less my age, and I feel that she, as a woman, could be just 5-10% more confident, and that would help her politically. So literally these kinds of rather banal observations about levels of owned confidence in particular really make a political difference too. So I wish, that's one politician for whom I wish to be more confident. Who are the most confident humans I've ever met? For me, to stand out. Drum roll. In second place would be the filmmaker Werner Herzog. Many years after I am dead, no one will watch my films, but they will read, and they will read my books. Not just a high level of social confidence, very high, but a very high level of owned confidence. The reason Werner is extraordinarily high but is second is because I can visualize the 15-year-old Werner Herzog sort of developing his confidence and it being a bit of a process. So he's got an extraordinary owned confidence, right? Much higher than very high people on owned confidence, but it's not, you can still somehow get a picture of how it got cultivated with him. But it's impregnable, right? You can't put Werner Herzog in a position where he'll be sort of wobbled or insecure. If Werner sees a blue sky and the entire world tells him there is no blue sky, Werner will say, there's a blue sky out there and nobody shall deny it. So he's just not going to be rocked by that at all. The single most confident person I've met, because of the effortlessness of the owned confidence, and we'll analyze it a bit, is Alfred Brendel, the musician. And so why is Alfred's confidence so strong? His social confidence is very high too. I mean, at a younger age, if Alfred Brendel walks into a room, you don't know anything about music or anything about anything else, you would say, let's say it's happened 25 years ago and he was 70, you would say, ooh, who is this man? He looks a bit awkward in some ways, but he's completely self-possessed. And there's a kind of a level of aristocratic self-possession there that is atypical. He would stand out in a room of 1,000 people, even if his movements are all not conventional. So what it's all about with Alfred Brendel is consciousness of his powers. And consciousness of one's powers is what inspires the ultimate owned confidence, even if there isn't a social confidence to accompany it. I mean, for example, take these most you know, solidly socially confident people we just mentioned, Clinton, Bill, we just mentioned Obama. Obama's owned confidence is higher than Bill Clinton's, actually. Clinton's social confidence is higher than Obama's. But let's take somebody like Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, with really great social owned confidence. I beg your pardon. I'm beginning to float a bit. It's not even 1,000th of the depth of owned confidence of somebody like Schubert, who died a year and a half after Beethoven, and who knew that he was as great a composer as Beethoven, even if none in the world acknowledged that. And that's confidence, not social confidence. We're talking about somebody sort of a bit, short, chubby cheeked little thing. Wouldn't have necessarily been socially confident, but at the level of owned confidence, had a lot going, because Schubert knew his extraordinarily rare capacity to manipulate Western musical language. Beethoven was number one in Europe, and Mozart was number one before him. I am number one now. I am number one in Europe. Nobody comes close to me. Schubert understood that. And he needed no affirmation from the way. He needed nobody to say that about him. How did he understand that? Because that's available to him through participation in musical activity. As he writes music, he sees that. That's an extraordinary level of owned confidence, right? That you just know. You just know this. Now, there's a lot that you can be non-self-transparent about, but typically great artists tend to be different in different fields a little bit, but certainly in music production, people tend to be, who are extreme historical freaks, tend to be just as good at placing their talent as they are at expressing their talent, because it's partly the same thing, right? When Beethoven, receives the Diabelli variation from Anton Diabelli, a little theme on which he writes an extraordinary masterpiece for the keyboard, he knows who else can do what else with that variation and what he can do. So being able to rate himself, as it were, is part of the same skill as being able to write the music. And so with Brendel, the confidence comes from his ability to look at a score and understand what is going on in the score psychologically in a way that just won't be bettered by anyone. Might not on every occasion translate into the greatest performance of all time, but he can do that. And he's also conscious that he has got a level of musical values, capacity for rhythmical strength, capacity to hold the long line, which are not surpassed. They might be matched by a few other musicians, but not really surpassed. And so that consciousness of his musical and psychological powers is what gives Brendel that self-possessing confidence. There is no need to doubt himself. So gossipy, is it worth talking about me? Is it not? I'm an embarrassable, but it's obviously embarrassing. Let's do it for funky fun. You'll be freaked out. You'll either think that what I'm saying is implausible or tragic, or both. So my social confidence is quite banal. It's by the very highest standards lowish, but obviously relative to the population it's high. I'd just call it, in relative to population terms, high. Probably most people would call it very high, in the sense that, yeah, I can walk into a room of strangers and try to tell them what to do, and even if they don't listen to me and send me to go to hell, I wouldn't be flustered by that. So I can walk into a room of people sitting down, tell them to just stand up, not give them a reason why, and whether they stand up or not, I can just feel unembarrassed and comfortable. But what's my level of smoothness with that compared with, let's say, Barack Obama or Bill Clinton? It's crap. Like, it's really crap. So, if we just count up heads watching this video at the level of social confidence, which is like, that's not a particularly great, it's a lovely virtue, but it's not always a great virtue. It's probably the more interesting humans are not the highest on social confidence. But at the level of social confidence, I'm clearly going to be higher than most, but just not particularly high. So maybe 1 in 50, 1 in 100 people watching this video would be on the same level of social confidence as me. And then if we go more rare, then they're going to be above me. So my confidence is pretty high. I'm very comfortable with it, but it's just nowhere near, right? Like that tall toy, journalist who's going to be 2 inches taller than me with perfect teeth is going to probably have somewhat smoother social confidence than me. So it's kind of like high population standard, but really nothing special by the standards of people who are amazing at it. Own confidence is different. My own confidence is freakishly high, to the point that I wouldn't even talk about having high confidence. I would talk about confidence being a non-question for me. Because if your confidence is 100%, you could kind of drop to 99, and I couldn't in principle, unless something happens to my brain. I get a parasite, goes to my brain chemistry changes, of course, and I can lose all my confidence. But yeah, my own confidence is high, and it's just to do with consciousness of my powers. It's just to do with the ability to objectively judge my capacities for imaginative self-extraction, my capacities for intuition, my capacities for emotional intelligence, and my capacities for robust reflectiveness, and to be able to judge them objectively. So to be able to say exactly what they are without overestimating them or underestimating them. And if I get it wrong, being able to, without psychological impact on me, just make the correction. So if the 2 people I admire the most in philosophy today, Charles Taylor and Alistair McIntyre, wrote me a letter and said, Vlad, we've just read your private philosophical notes for possible future published material, and we think they are kind of crap, actually. You've gone off on the wrong tangent, and the levels are not there. The levels of imagination are not there. The levels of robustness, reflective robustness, are not there. That response from these 2 people whose work I so much admire would have literally the level of psychological destabilization on me as having a sip of green tea. I'm going to push the coffee away now. I'm reaching almost half a cup, which is bad. Why? Is it because I'm going to say, no, I'm right, and Alistair and Chuck Taylor are just wrong? No, it's because it's going to be effortless for me to say, I'm right, they're wrong, and effortless for me to say, oh, they're right, I'm wrong. I take my notes, I put them in the bin, and I have to do better. That just wouldn't destabilize me. And that's to do with my confidence in my ability to actually understand their criticism and apply it to my notes. And as a result, throw my notes, it might be 20 years in the building up process, away. And also, I give myself a certain rating in philosophy that I'm just pretty clear about. It's a very weird rating to give, because I'm basing it on capacity, but not actual produced work out there. So that's why it's sort of really lame to talk about it. But I have, interacted with some of the leading philosophers in the world. They have interacted with me. I've been in these rooms many, many times over. So there is a wherewithal there. So I know how that world works and I know where to put myself. And I really admire people who can. One of my teachers in the postgrad period at Oxford, Alan Ryan, was very beautiful about this. He said, the problem I've had, and he's like the leading John Stuart Mill expert in the world, and writes historically, he's read just wonderfully for the New York Review of Books. And he said, my problem was I've always been two little steps behind Bernard Williams in my intelligence. And these two steps make the world of difference between being able to do philosophy in a certain way and not being able to do philosophy in a certain way. I've always been behind Bernard Williams, Richard Wolheim, and Stuart Hampshire in this. So I actually think Richard Wolheim and Bernard Williams are more intelligent than Stuart Hampshire, but that's a separate conversation. Stuart Hampshire I admire enormously. And so I love that capability. And it's compatible with confidence too, although in many ways, I think historically Alan Ryan may have had issues around being, good enough and fitting in. But the point is that in principle, it's possible to judge yourself very accurately and have sort of full confidence. So I have an extremely high view of my upper capacity as a philosopher, which is not likely to be realized in my lifetime. It would require me getting it well tomorrow, which is not going to happen from ME. And it would require me just being extraordinarily lucky and living long and just getting on a roll with philosophical production. But if that occurred to me, I could reach what I would rate as a high 3 out of 10 as a philosopher. So I could never be a 4 out of 10 philosopher, but I could reach sort of 3.7, 3.8 out of 10 as a philosopher if things went as well as they possibly could. Which they're just not going to go to. So I'm not going to reach 3.8 in this lifetime. But that's my ceiling. And that's really freaky. So it's an extraordinarily high rating of my capacity. I mean, I would regard Plato as maybe a 9, Nietzsche as maybe 6 or 7, Wittgenstein in the middle to high 4s. And the philosophers I greatly admire from the last 70 years, like Richard Wolheim and Bernard Williams, they peaked at a high 3. So, a really amazing professor of philosophy who is like way above their colleagues could be like a 2. So that's the rating. But it's meaningless to talk about it because I need to produce the work or shut up ultimately. But in the end, I do have that self-transparency, that self-awareness about where my range is, let's say from 2.5 to 3.7. And that transparency gives me total confidence, right? I know I can never be 4. I know that it's very easy for me to be above 2. So that kind of consciousness of one's powers is what gives me the kind of confidence that means that, when people I love like Charles Taylor and Alistair McIntyre tell me that everything needs to be put in the bin, I can either deny their criticism or fully accept it and put it in the bin and be content. So enough gossip personally. This was weird, but maybe a funky fun chat. I don't know how you went with it or how you managed to be 33 minutes with me on this, but thank you.